Hello and welcome to a special New York Times read along. We are taking a little time on this anniversary of 9/11 um, to take a look at the special section that the New York Times put together for the 20th anniversary. My name is Neil Parekh, and I am the executive producer and sometime guest host. Jane Mitchell, a news designer with the New York Times, will be joining us. Um, and we are so happy to have her. Um, we kind of put this together quickly, so just want to take a moment and again thank everyone for joining us. You might be watching this live, you might watch it later. Usually, the show is on Sunday mornings at 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time, but again, today we decided to do a quick 9/11 anniversary special to look at the special section that the Times put together. I'm going to go ahead and bring on my colleague, Paula Kiger. You don't usually see her on camera, but Paula has joined us on a Saturday afternoon to help produce the show on short notice. Um,
Hey, Neil.
Paula, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Um, I want to ask you what we're going to do is we're going to talk about our experience on 9/11 a little bit. We're going to bring Sri on, and then we're going to bring on our guest. I'm going to take care of a few things, Paula, while you share your background on with on 9/11, and also the story behind this photo from just a few years ago.
Just a few years ago, right. Thank you. And I appreciate, Jane, you joining us and your work on this special section. At the time of the 9/11 attacks, I was at work in Tallahassee, Florida, but I lived in New York from 1989 to 92, and it remains my happy place in every way. So these attacks here and in Pennsylvania and at the Pentagon were, as all of us, gutting. The story behind the picture is that my husband and I got married. I had been living in New York. He was in Tallahassee. We had been dating before I went to New York, but I wanted to get married with the Twin Towers and the skyline in the background. And that's why we got married at the Brooklyn Promenade. And that's why those pictures have such significant meaning now. We went back there when our children were around 7 and 10 and stood in that same place and took pictures, which certainly was a very poignant memory that the pictures now don't have the Twin Towers in the background. But it still has a lot of meaning. And that's a little bit about my story. On the actual day I was at work in Tallahassee, sitting at my desk, I had a child who had just started kindergarten because Florida starts school very early. So she was in her second week of kindergarten, and my 2-year-old was at daycare. And one of the things I recall is one of the other parents who happened to be volunteering at the school saying what a wonderful job the principal did of walking these elementary school kids in an appropriate way through what was happening. Not that any of us could really make sense of it at the time, but kids were about to be let back out into their community, and the principal took some control over what they were about to try to absorb and what their families were going to be experiencing. And that's one thing that has always struck me, is that it definitely takes a village to help people process something like this with each other and for each other.
Absolutely. For me, it was actually, I'm from New York originally, as folks know, from Hastings on Hudson. And I was actually living in Seattle at the time. And the interesting bit for us was that we had friends flying in from New York the night before. And I remember very distinctly that their flight got delayed because it was there was a lot of rain on the evening of September 10th. The Yankee game that night was delayed. We ended up getting them from the airport at like 3 in the morning and coming home. We talked for a bit and then just conked out. So you can imagine the next morning, I missed my mom's calls. My mom called me, of course, around 8:50 when the first plane hit, just after 8:50. I didn't hear it at all. I had taken the day off from work. And then when my mother-in-law called about an hour later, I was like, "Oh, hey, Ma, how you doing?" I call her mom as well. Yeah,
Yeah.
we had a rough night. Our friends came over. They're still sleeping. Pam's still asleep. She's like, Neil, stop talking. What's going on? Like she told me that the planes hit, and we like immediately like woke up, and turned everything on, and it was very surreal to be in Seattle for 9/11 and the aftermath. Um, with all our connections in New York, my sister saw,
Yes.
the planes hit. Was at the Empire State Building, I think, for a meeting or on her way. I have my wife's cousins. Her husband was actually worked with Con Ed. He was near Ground Zero, walked up all the way afterwards. So it means a lot to all of us. We all have our own connection. I just want to show real
Yes.
quickly. I angle up, if you can see behind me, that's a treasured poster that I bought. You can just see the Twin Towers in the background, which is interesting.
I
But
probably
with
can't do it as smoothly as you, but there's mine. It's a Leroy Neiman that was pre 9/11,
yeah,
so has a lot of
um,
memories.
so with that, I'm going to bring on our host, Srinivasan. Sri, can you tell us about your experience that day? 1 second,
Thank you,
Sri.
Neil.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Neil, for bringing us together here today. The New York Times special edition that we're going to talk about in just a minute with the art director of this section, Jane Mitchell, is going to be very moving discussion, I'm sure. So everyone, please stay tuned. As for me, my wife and I had just spent a week in Bermuda as part of a conference for the Society of American Travel Writers, and we were supposed to return on Sunday, but because of a big hurricane, we were to arrive on Tuesday instead. And I wanted to fly in a little later, sleep in and fly in a little later. Instead, Rupa insisted we've got to take the first flight out, and we landed at 8:15 in New York. Everyone who was in the flight that we would have taken got diverted to Newfoundland and parts unknown, and took weeks to get or days to get back to New York City. As we were coming into New York, we could see the skyline. We saw the Twin Towers. It was a beautiful day, now almost kind of a legendarily beautiful day. I call that shade of sky 9/11 blue whenever I see it anywhere in the world. Today was beautiful, but nothing like it. And we landed. We were on a car, in a taxi from LaGuardia. And as we're driving, Rupa sees some smoke coming out of somewhere in Manhattan, and he says, "There are no smokestacks, are there?" But I was saying, like, there's something like at Edison, Con Edison had smokestacks on the FDR Drive. So I thought maybe it was that. And then we heard a siren, a police siren. So we thought the cab driver had done something wrong. So he starts to pull over. It's a police car, then an ambulance, and an ambulance, and an ambulance, all of them going down to the Twin Towers. Of course, they didn't have anyone to save from the survivors that day. But of course, lots of people were injured in other ways. It was just, but we got home, and the first building collapsed, the second building, all of that happened. And we'll never forget. And that's why, in part, we're doing this here today. So thank you for asking, Neil. It was a very emotional day. And 20 years later, I just want to say that we came together that day and in the weeks after, and the world did. And America responded so beautifully to that crisis. But today, with the current crisis we have now, we have done the opposite. America has done an awful job in this current crisis because of tools like social media and the partisanship and the way the Fox News and others are sharing information. And something that didn't exist then, social media influencers have kind of taken the side of the virus. And that's partly the reason we're here today. The reason we were able to bounce back from 9/11 was because America took the side of America and not the terrorists. But today, it's the equivalent of Americans taking the side of the terrorists with the way we've handled the pandemic. So that's my editorial for today. And it's so sad that we're in this situation, Neil. You're muted.
We have a couple people watching. This is a quick show that we pulled together. We're usually on Sunday mornings. We saw that the New York Times, actually Wayne Camadoy, who works at the Times, sent me an email, told me about the special section, and we realized that we wanted to do something special for this anniversary, the 20th anniversary. We do have a comment from our friend Stephen Kaplan, who was a photographer, photo editor with the Times. I know that and he's working on sharing his story on Facebook and on Twitter. He was on the other side. He was in New Jersey and saw what happened and took a raft across the river to get to downtown to do his work. And he's talking about that in his comment. It was a tough week for all of us. He had just moved to Jersey City. He witnessed it, and then he went and went to work, of course.
And everyone should check him out at Spin It Social. You can see he's been posting some amazing images. I do want to tell everybody that if you're just joining us, the New York Times Read Along is usually on Sunday mornings for 5.5 years. October is our anniversary coming up. And tomorrow we have a 9/11 connected show because it's not the New York Times Read Along, it's the Washington Post Read Along. Neil will be hosting a conversation with Washington Post theater critic, who's the chief drama critic of the Washington Post, Peter Marks. And he spent 9 years at the New York Times, where he was a drama critic, theater reporter, metro reporter, and national correspondent during the 2001 presidential campaign. And he covered the 9/11's impact on the arts. So this is going to be a fantastic show tomorrow, 8:30 a.m. Eastern. It'll be live on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and LinkedIn. And you can watch it at 8:30 a.m. Eastern time to 10 a.m. Or you can watch it with this show. It'll be available instantly as soon as we go off the air on all of those platforms. Please tag a friend right now. If you're watching anyone on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, or LinkedIn, they can watch this live or they can watch this later. Tell us where you're watching from. Tell us your memories of 9/11 and we'll try to share them. Darshana is watching from Baroda in Gujarat. Thank you so much.
Today.
I know that's where Neil's family is from. And Darshana says the Twin Towers were my first view of America from the air when I came to the US 20 years ago in August 2001. So many memories for so many people like that, seeing those Twin Towers. And Danielle's watching in Southern Maine. My husband, Jim Morin, was at the Miami Herald and as usual watched the news on TV while drawing his political cartoon, 2-time Pulitzer Prize winning cartoonist Jim Morin. And he went into the newsroom after that first crash and told the executive editor, Tom Fielder, and then others came into the newsroom. He called me in time for me to watch the second plane crash. I thought it was a toy depiction in a sci-fi movie, like out of the King Kong type film. Then I was confused and disoriented for hours. Danielle was sitting in this table here in New York City in my apartment as a guest on the New York Times Read Along many years later, of course. And we've also had Jim on. Doug says, I was supposed to fly to the DC area on 9/10, but canceled the trip at the last minute on 9/11. I was asleep in my San Francisco apartment when my mother called around 6 a.m. to tell me what was happening. So that was 9 a.m. Eastern. Things had already progressed. And everyone follow Doug at SFDoug on Twitter. So I think we're ready for our guest.
I was going to mention just one last comment. I don't know if you recognize the Twitter handle, but thinking of you today, I still remember how I was glued to the TV thousands of miles away. Absolutely. So you mentioned our guest, Sri, again, to remind folks who may have joined us late. Jane Mitchell, news designer for the New York Times and the art director for today's special 20th anniversary section, is our guest. And there's a depiction, a cover of the front page of the section that Sri has with him. So we'll go ahead and bring her on. And we'll just chat with her a little bit before we get into the paper. Sri?
Thank you very much, Neil. And hi, Jane.
Hi. It's so good to be here.
Thank you for being here. I know this is not the way we want to meet, Jane, but thank you very much for being here and spending part of your Saturday, one of the toughest days of the year, especially with this anniversary, the 20th anniversary. I think there's a resonance that even the annual commemorations have not had. Please start by telling us where you were that day.
Sure. I turned 13 on September 11, 2001. It's my birthday. So I was in grade school.
Wait a minute, it's your birthday today? Wait a minute,
it is.
Oh my
yeah.
God. Okay. Happy birthday.
Thank
Thank you for,
you.
again, thank you for carving out some time today. What a story.
Jane,
Not a
I don't
problem.
usually come back in. You didn't mention that when I emailed, when we called, we harassed you about. Oh my God! Happy birthday to. I mean, for this to be your birthday, I know that's challenging for some folks, but thank you for spending time with us today. That's, oh my God, incredible.
Sure, of
I thought
course.
we were
No,
crazy, but
I was telling my wife this morning, my nephew and 12 other people have, Facebook friends have birthdays today, but now I have a 14th friend who has a birthday today. Thank you again for being here.
yeah, of course. No, I'm really happy to be here. Happy to talk about this section. Everyone has a 9/11 story, like where they were on, when they found out about the first plane crash. And I was in 7th grade and was meeting with a teacher for like a student council meeting, and she had the news on, and I remember that was how I found out. And my school, I'm from Cincinnati, and that's where I was, and we stayed in school the whole day. But I remember getting home, and we were just glued to the TV, sitting there with my mom and dad and grandma and siblings, just watching the news events and not being able to comprehend or understand what was going on, and not being able to look away either. But
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. And I know people in other cities all over the world were worried about what was going on. And years later, I was in Detroit, and I was in the GM Tower, which is the tallest building there, or was the tallest building there, and they had evacuated that as well. And lots of cities all over North America were doing the same. And just very quickly, if you can tell us what you do at the Times and how did you get there and how long you've been there.
Oh, sure. So I'm a news designer for the Times. I work on enterprise pieces, so some of our longer form stories, or stories that have a lot of resources put into them. So enterprise photography. I've been at the Times for, I guess, 5 years now. Before that, I was at the Plain Dealer in Cleveland. Yeah, great newspaper. Unfortunate times now for them, but yeah, so that's kind of what I do. I work specifically on print also, so I'm not in digital design.
Okay, so just so that people understand, it's not like they just take whatever's online and just throw it in print, or vice versa. There's special design teams, there are special editors, and in a time when so much is digital right now, the Times, I have noticed, and we've been told by your colleagues who've been guests on this show so many times, that the Times is investing even more in the design, the storytelling in print, to make the print subscribers, feel special.
Definitely. I mean, this right now, working in print, like at the New York Times, it feels a bit like a golden age. I have really supportive bosses who really want to push what we can do in print, and translating some of these more intricate interactives or videos and getting that like great New York Times content into the paper it's really exciting time, actually.
So let's talk about the special section. I will show it on my cell phone camera so people can see it. But tell us how long it takes for something like this to come together. It's about 18 pages and very dramatic images. And we'll look in a second more closely at the cover image. There it is. It's a reflection of the new World Trade Center. I think it's called One World. I've always been confused about the naming of the new building. But so tell us how this all came together, and then we'll look at this on the screen.
Sure. So I was assigned this section probably about a month ago. I think it was early August that my bosses, Fred Bierman and Andrew Sondern, asked if I would be interested in taking on this project. And obviously September 11th is my birthday, and I also really love working on special sections, and knew it was going to be a heavy one to pick up and emotional, but knew I wanted to take on the challenge. So that was like about a month ago, and was meeting with some editors around the building. So something about this section that's a little bit different is the content was coming from every desk at the New York Times. So obviously Metro is involved, the culture desk is involved, foreign, national, travel was involved at one point too, and it was kind of trying to wrangle all of these different people with different story ideas into a cohesive section, and trying to form what a 20-year section should be. So it started with a long list in a Google Doc that, as things evolved, Afghanistan happened, things were getting edited. We were editing down the list into a, comprehensive story list that hopefully gets a range of kind of like where we are today, but also reflecting on the day, something that to use the phrase, we can't forget. It's impossible to forget.
And thank you. And it includes the list of everyone who died in New York City, at the Pentagon, and in Shanksville and Washington. So this is part of what you had to do. Just this one task of doing this would have been emotionally draining, and deciding how much space to give it and how to fit everyone into 2 pages. I know the Times, unfortunately, has had experience trying to put 10,000, 50,000 people in print because of this pandemic. Talk about just this section, these 2 pages, please.
Sure. So we knew from the beginning that, we wanted in some way to remember and honor the people who died that day. And the list of names was actually suggested kind of early on. And there were a couple of ideas also floating around, potentially going back to Portraits of Grief, the series that the Times did in the days following.
The incredible series
Yeah.
that won all kinds of awards, Portraits of Grief. Those of you who didn't live through that time, please check that out online.
Yeah, so there was talk about potentially like bringing some of that back or updating Portraits of Grief, and things in the newsroom got a little bit crazy. And honestly, those 2 pages I think are my favorite in this section in terms of content and design. I think it's so powerful to be able to just read their names in a really small way, honoring those who have died and hopefully comforting people who loved them. I know just putting it all together, it was powerful, like reading their names.
Sure, I'm just looking here.
Yeah.
And we have people here who are very interested in design and storytelling online. Just talk about the use of white space here. You didn't need to give this much room here or this much room here or just after the K. Talk about how that figures in this, and then how did you decide it's going to be 2 pages versus 4? And did you know it was going to be 2 right from the beginning, or did you have to scramble and reduce the point size, etc.?
Yeah, so the use of white space, I think you want these little moments to breathe, and adding in the white space it enhances the density of the rest. It begins to hit you like how many people actually, like on one day, died from these events. And that's not even to count the number of people who have died of 9/11 related illness in the 20 years since, or in the wars that we fought. And I did know from the beginning that I wanted it to be in smaller point size, something a little more understated and somber, and just very straightforward in terms of design. Like, these are the names, and allow people to see them and, you know, find a name of the person that you know.
Thank you, folks. We're talking to Jane Mitchell, who art directed the special section. It's her birthday today, and she's so kind to spend part of it with us. We'd love to hear where you were on 9/11, folks. Please post in the comments, and maybe we'll look at a couple of comments right now before we look at these photographs of 9/11, because I want to hear the stories of these and how they were put together. We will take a look at people are saying hello. And here's a comment. I didn't realize how strong the emotional impact still is 20 years on. Truly a defining moment. And
Sri, that's our friend Timo from
hi,
Brussels.
Timo. Thank you so much for watching in Brussels. And I know that Jane would be happy to hear that this is everyone's wishing her a birthday from around the world today. And I think we're now ready to just look at the photographs of 9/11. Tell us about the back page, and then we'll go back to the front. This is on the back page. How did you decide that this was going to be the back page and not, somewhere else?
Sure. Well, from the beginning, I, as a designer, kept asking a range of people, like, what do you think about using the photography from the day? Is it too traumatic to see? Is there a way, is there something more to say than just bringing up the trauma of seeing these photos again? And the photo editor, she had suggested going back to the photographers and asking them to reflect on what it took to make these images. And it's something, that I love reading, the kind of behind the scenes of journalism. And I think probably your viewers do as well, considering what the show is. But
yeah, no, thank you. Really,
yeah,
I just wanted to say that I didn't read all the fine print first, so I just took a look at this picture, and I saw, and I didn't even see this name of the photographer here, so I thought it was the subject's memories of the day. So I thought this was the memory of this person. I thought you folks had tracked him down and done that, but these are actually memories of the photographers.
Yeah, that's actually that's a great idea. But I do know that just in hearing what it took to get the photographers to reflect on these, I know it's still painful for them to look at their work, some of them. And I know we were asked to not include certain photographs that, a subject is a very private person, and it's extremely painful to know that, a photo of them on 9/11 is still circulating. So there was a lot of back and forth. There was a lot of conversation about what it means to use these photos, and putting it on the back page came a little bit later in the process. As I was looking out the section and thinking about the pacing of it, and like, where do we start and where do we go, and how do these pieces talk to each other? Every time I put this inside next to something, it felt so jarring. It was difficult to find a page that it could face. And I think isolating it on the back cover began to feel like the natural spot. And I'm grateful to my colleague Andrew Sondern, who had suggested that, and it solved a lot of problems from a content flow perspective.
Sure. I'm just reading now Angel Franco's memory of this photograph. I remember seeing this in the New York Times, I presume on the 12th. I tried to think of that day. I witnessed the horror of New Yorkers' loss, working moms, dads, sons and daughters, friends. I have nightmares. Not sleeping since 9/11 has become the norm. The image of the woman frozen in time and reacting to the fall of the first World Trade Center tower. What a photograph, and this woman and her, etched there forever. Just really powerful. And you have pictures from different places, including the Pentagon here. And this is Suzanne DiCillo's picture. This is outside St. Francis Assisi Church for the burial service of Michael Judge, the Franciscan friar, priest, and chaplain to the New York City Fire Department. A crowd gathered in front of Engine 1 Ladder 24 Firehouse opposite the church, a crew of mostly firefighters, some in old uniforms. At the end of the homily, Judge's friend and fellow friar, Michael A. Duffy, asked everyone to stand, raise their right hand, and give Michael, who had blessed so many people in life and death, a blessing. And there you see this picture. And then Suzanne caught that. These pictures are so moving, and I'm getting emotional now. Let's talk about a different picture. How did you pick this for the cover?
Sure. So this photo was actually chosen, I think, a day or two before closing. So George Etheridge took this photograph, and he originally was on assignment for the Michael Kimmelman piece, which is inside looking at Ground Zero and how that area has been rebuilt. And he had an image of One World Trade Center, and it was reflected in the Goldman Sachs building. And this image, I mean, it was beautiful, it was moving, it was still a reflection, and it felt kind of dreamlike, but it was very kind of muddy in terms of color, and I don't want to say dingy, but it was not bright, it was not, that 9/11 blue sky that, I think everyone remembers from that day. So we were using that photo for a while, and it just wasn't quite feeling right. So we sent George back out on an assignment to shoot for the cover, and he made this frame, which is, very dreamy, very ethereal. It gets that bright blue. And this is actually from 4 World Trade. So it's shot through a different building as well. And I think he did a great job.
Thank you. I can see all the way in the distance there, that building. You probably can't see it on the camera, but I can see that building, One World Trade, all the way in the distance from my apartment right now. One of the most amazing articles about anything to do with 9/11 is this essay by our friend Dan Barry, with a photograph by Todd Heisler. This is What Does It Mean to Never Forget? 20 years later, a look at what we hold on to and what we choose to let go. It's not that long. It's online. Everybody must read this. Such a powerful story. And he tells it so well. I read it only online, Jane, but I'm now looking at it here, and I see this is the power of print. It was so powerful online, but like this, it's even more powerful. Talk about that, please.
Sure. So when we were first talking about the section and forming it, and kind of what do we need, we needed an opening essay, something to really set the tone and the where we are today, 20 years later. And obviously Dan Barry is everyone's top choice for something like this. He's so great, and a meditation on remembering or misremembering and collective memory. I mean, it's incredibly powerful. And something with the design was just keeping these things really simple. Like Todd's photo has this kind of haunting quality to it, and the city is lit in such an intense, dramatic way, and the people are all isolated, and alone. So to go from the cover, which is a really zoomed in photo of a building, to then pan out and this is taken from the Staten Island Ferry, but to kind of had this, wider shot, and played at 12 columns, gives you kind of a different feel, right?
It really does, yeah.
Yeah.
For those watching and confused by the reference to the 12 count, because these are wider columns, so these are not the regular newsprint columns. So when you see on the front page, sometimes we've talked about this on the show. They'll say it's a 6-column headline, and because this is 2 pages, this is a 12-column spread. But even though it's it looks fewer here because of the way it's laid out. I don't want to spend the entire birthday of Jane Mitchell interviewing her for this, so we're going to move on to some of the other sections. I could dwell on this forever, but let's keep going. Talk about this section by Hilary Swift and Corey Kilgannon. For many survivors, dust is still taking its toll, and you also have little stats here, and these are the victims who survived. And who had to deal with the chronic conditions. And I know that Jon Stewart has been a very eloquent fighter for these folks.
Yeah, this was pitched really early on in the process, wanting to get these portraits in the section in their stories, and it's sobering thinking of all the people who are still being affected. Like, it is still September 11th, 2001 for many people for multiple reasons, whether it's grieving somebody who died or fighting an illness that was 9/11 related. There's a story in here of a woman, I believe she has respiratory problems now, but she wasn't even born then. Like, she was, her mom was pregnant with her, and she's affected by this. And
wow.
Yeah, and just seeing all their faces. So going from a Dan Barry story about memory, and then seeing directly some people who have like a very intense connection to the day, I felt like was important. Like, we have buildings in the beginning, but then to go to a face was an important transition I think we needed to make early on, is that this is about the people who were affected by the day. Like, ultimately, the section should be recognizing the impact it made on individual lives.
This is the young woman you're talking about. She's only 19, and everyone in the family has chronic issues, and it's so sad. And you had mentioned Mike mentioned the Michael Kimmelman architecture piece, Out of Rubble, A New Urbanism. Rebuilding was a mess, but it helped foster a broader vision of what a neighborhood can be. I would, Jane, when I would open the show, we've been almost doing this for almost 6 years, I would start by showing the downtown area, and I would say, if this was Shanghai, they would have built the successor tower, in 5 years or 2 years, not in whatever it took 15, 16 years for it to happen. So talk about this piece, and again, how you've chosen to use the photograph and white space.
Sure. So I actually went down to the area. Like, I knew I needed to get some perspective on like what the area was like. I'd been down there a couple of times, but never with the eye of needing to lay out pages and use photography. And it is a bit chaotic. There are like these moments of memorial and quiet, but then you're surrounded by commerce and like lower Manhattan, and it's a little bit chaotic at points. And I said earlier, George Etheridge, he took these photographs and doing something where the depth of field is compacted as an opening, kind of allowing those spikes to point you to the headline, to point you to the white space. There's so much going on in that photo, and it's pretty abstract. And then to have these spaces of white to, allow the type to sit in an area that not filling all of the space. I think in news design, we go top top to bottom, like left to right, like use the space that you're given. And I think allowing moments for pause and reflection and emptiness, was important, and something that I was looking at from the beginning of the
You're looking
design
here at
process.
a photograph of 2021, right, where these kids are playing with in masks with basketball. Just the surreal is a word I keep coming back to because I'm trying to understand this. Folks, if you're looking for this in today's paper, this is actually Sunday's New York Times, the Sunday September 12th paper. If you live in Manhattan and some other places, they deliver it early, and so that's why we're able to do this today. So if you are able to get to a newsstand where they have the New York Times tomorrow, you'll be able to get this kind of commemorative edition. Darshana says, I really, really wish I had a copy of today's New York Times. She's all the way in India. And while obviously the online stuff is easily available, it won't be there. So well put, moments of quiet reflection surrounded by commerce. Jane, you're a poet in addition to a designer. Let's look at last few things here. This is a section called Culture Shock, the horror defied artistic interpretation at the time, and it continues to elude a definitive cultural reckoning. Jason Farago's piece, and then the 9/11 loose change video was a precursor to the landscape of viral conspiracy theories. Kevin Roos's piece. Loose change was horrifying and a terrible thing that they put together. The conspirators did, and now it's nothing compared to what's happening on a daily basis. So this is all very powerful, and use some screen caps here. Here is Kiefer Sutherland of 24. So trying to capture all of that. And you used, is this a mosaic? What is this piece of art?
That's the painting by Jennifer Bartlett in the opening of the Jason's piece. It's her, it's her painting that he talks about.
Nice.
Yeah.
And then this headline, I've got whoever, you and your team who put this headline on, Muslim period, American period. We heard the word Muslim American more times after 9/11 than we did before 9/11, but I've never seen it rendered this way. I just want to say these two words with the periods, obviously all done on purpose. Please talk to us about it. The attacks gave rise to a wave of anti-Muslim hate, but also to a generation determined to define itself. Elizabeth Diaz's piece.
Yeah, Dave Vesey was the copy editor on this section, and he wrote all of the headlines and banks and captions that you're reading. And he's the best. Just he takes chances with his headlines, and they're often poetic and powerful. And it was funny, we had a meeting going through the section, and he was talking about all of his headlines, and we were talking with editors and kind of getting clearance for everything. And he was a little uneasy at first, like, could this come off as divisive as opposed to being like powerful and being like, I am, allowing a person to be more than one thing, right? Like, I am Muslim and American. So we realized that a photo was going to have to help the headline as well. Like, we all loved it and knew exactly what he was going for, but depending on what image is there, you could really sway like what that headline means. And Gina Privater, who is the photo editor for the section, she found this image, and it the story came together, the headline and photo working together to tell what Elizabeth Diaz is writing about.
Thank you. And then this is the last 4 pages before we finish. Mission unfinished. Veterans describe how the objectives in Afghanistan ultimately sprawled into a 2-decade occupation. Look at these photographs. They're of people, they're of things, they're of tattoos, and it's John Ismay and photographs by Greg Kahn.
Yeah, these are beautiful images, very painterly, and they started to be filed, I guess, like 2 weeks or something before. And I originally hadn't been told that there would be objects for the veterans as well. And I knew that I wanted to use them in print. Seeing what these veterans held on to from the war, I feel like tells a really intimate personal story that obviously John's piece gets at, but to see images of these objects has its own power.
It does. This is Matthew Archuleta's fragment of a water jug when his vehicle was hit by an IED. These are the glass eyes that Platt Weinrich still wears. He says he allows them himself one day a year, 5 minutes, to let the memory come back. Just so powerful. And then the final piece here is for veterans, the trauma doesn't end with service. Physical and mental pain, often invisible to others, can lead to alienation, by Jennifer Steinhauer.
That's a difficult story to read. It's heartbreaking, and we include the line for if you are having thoughts of suicide to call the National Prevention Hotline. It's an intense story to read, but one that's important to realize.
Thank you. And for those who may have missed the beginning, we started with this section, these 2 pages, naming every single person who died in New York, Washington, and Pennsylvania. And then the final page, we already discussed this, were the photographs of 9/11. Jane, it's hard to use a word like congratulations on something like this, because this is incredibly important and powerful professional work, but it's so tied up in complicated emotions and a very difficult day.
Yeah, thanks. It means a lot to talk through this, to talk through the process. It was intense, for sure.
And let's give a couple, I know you mentioned names throughout the show, but if you want to give a couple of shout outs to colleagues who you didn't have a chance to mention yet, or if you want to mention them again, you're welcome to. And then just, I want everyone to notice what you're seeing here is a reflection of the New York City sky. Again, not quite 9/11 blue, but very powerful on my glass dining table.
It's a beautiful reflection on the table. I want to thank the team who worked on this section. So Monica Drake, who's in charge of special projects.
By the way, 3-time guest of the show.
She's great. Yeah. Tom Jolly, who is the print hub director.
2-time guest.
Yes, he's great. Guest. Love him. He was instrumental in trying to form this section and what stories to include. Jen Harlan and Adam Sternberg, who were the editors for the section. Gina Privatere, who was the photo editor, Dave Bessie, who was the copy editor, Fred Bierman and Andrew Sondern, who are just incredible design bosses and support systems through literally everything that we do, but this one in particular, it meant a lot to have their support. So yeah.
Thank you. We're seeing a comment from Wayne Camadoy, who is one of your colleagues. This section shows the care placed in many facets of journalism, big picture to granular detail. And thank you, Wayne, for being such a great friend of the show and for all your support these many, many years. Thank you, everyone, for watching. I'm going to ask Neil to come back and we'll say goodbye to Jane together. If this had been any other show, we would have sung Jane a happy birthday song, but that is not appropriate today. But I hope she gets to celebrate with friends, family, and loved ones. What a day to have a birthday. What a gift to give to the world, Jane, that you have done today. You should be very proud of pulling this all together.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jane. Again, really can't believe that you joined us on your birthday. That definitely is a big honor. I mean, it's great to have you on the show, short notice, to talk about such important work. And this is, we mentioned when we spoke earlier, The New York Times means so much to all of us as we're talking, as we're thinking. I'm going to share the story, Shri, that you often share on my behalf. My father, well, I grew up reading the New York Times from New York. The blue bag hit our driveway every day, and when he passed away, when he was cremated, his one of his wishes was to have a print edition of the Sunday paper in the casket with him. This is what motivates us. We love journalism. We love print, the New York Times in particular, obviously. And thank you so much for, as Wayne said, the care and dedication that you showed with this. I think that everyone involved, from the families, the first responders, the survivors, all are honored by the work you did with this, and the work of all your colleagues as well, the photographers and the writers. But collectively, thank you for that.
I'll also add that this is, we do the show, Neil, every Sunday, and tomorrow you have another episode where you're going to be with the Washington Post chief drama critic who was with the New York Times in 9/11. We do this not because we agree with everything the New York Times does, but we do this to celebrate journalism, and we encourage everybody to support print newspapers and news organizations, print or not, in your hometowns. The New York Times occasionally runs a series of ads promoting local journalism in other publications. And I like to think of the importance of that all the time. So many great comments coming in. That's our friend
From Jeannie Pinder.
Yes,
Clear
who's
health
going to be
costs.
our guest. She's going to be our guest
Yeah.
soon. And Darshana says, that is so incredible, Neil. Thank you for sharing that about your father and
Sure.
his love of the paper. Darshana says, big hugs to everyone. Laura Silverman, who is very thoughtful and a former guest of the show, we very hard to relive that day, even at this distance, both space and time. And this everything just come together beautifully. And Patty says, may their legacy live on forever, everyone who has passed, for sure. And I just wanted to also just show everyone very quickly that I have a thread that I've put together of
Sure.
9/11 links. And it starts with an essay I wrote about the day I hosted the Taliban in New York City in 1999. This was 24 months before the Bamiyan Buddha statues were destroyed and 33 months before 9/11. But it was an incredibly surreal day that we hosted this event, and I explained the controversy and everything behind it. And I'm doing this thread, including emails from that day and my flying in with my wife to New York City at 8:10 a.m. The first building would be hit around 8:40. And then here's a look at the Portraits of Grief, including the revisiting that you folks did at the New York Times, Jane. And then the Wall Street Journal had it really tough to produce the paper because they were right next to the 9/11 ground zero space. And then this is our friend Vikas Khanna, the celebrity chef who was working at a small Indian restaurant at that time and now has had this great career. This is Twin Tower cameos of movies with the Twin Tower in it, and an ad for the original Spider-Man from 2002 that had the Twin Towers in it and was pulled by the producers, obviously, after 9/11. The musician Ryan Adams, who would be accused of sexual misconduct years later, 4 days before 9/11, shot a music video right in front of the Twin Towers. And then here's that Dan Barry essay, which we talked about with Jane at length, and so much more, magazine covers, etc. So you can find all of this pinned to the top of my Twitter thread right now, and you can see it there. And we'd love for you all to take a look. So with that, I think it's time to let Jane go, and Neil and everybody. Thank you very much, Jane. Happy birthday under difficult circumstances, but you were so kind to spend it with us for more than an hour. Thank you.
Yeah, so happy to be here. Thanks for all the work that you guys do in promoting print in the New York Times. I really, really appreciate it.
And thank you for being a viewer as well, Jane. You know that you catch the show when you can. So thank you for that.
All right,
Great.
Neil, we'll see you tomorrow, 8:30 a.m. for the
Yep.
Washington Post read along with the chief drama critic of the Washington Post. And then we have some other great guests coming up. Maybe we can just quickly just show folks who's coming up. Every Sunday we do this 8:30 a.m. to 10 a.m. Eastern. And as soon as it's off the air, it'll rerun on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and on LinkedIn. So please do take a look and tell your friends. This is the show tomorrow with Peter Marks. And then coming up, look at this great lineup of speakers. We have Jeanette Howard, who has co-written the Billie Jean King autobiography. Don't forget to watch the US Open Final starting at 4 p.m. today Eastern Time. Jeannie Pinder, who's watching now, will be with us. 23 years at the New York Times, and what a great project she has. Clear Health Costs, a journalism company bringing transparency to healthcare costs. And then Jared Adams, who's written a book, Redeeming Justice, From Defendant to Defender, My Fight for Equity on Both Sides of a Broken System. We'll see you next Sunday and every Sunday on the New York Times Read Along, live or later. Bye, everyone. Thank you.